Perfect, thanks.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to our September 2nd Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee 2021. I hope you had a good summer. Before I start, I would like to ask the committee coordinator to call for quorum, Mr. Desjardins.
Councillor Meehan.
I'm here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts.
Here.
And Chair El Shantiri.
Here.
All accounted for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desjardins. Here's the chair's statement, Republic hearing for OP and zoning item. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as item 1 and item 2 on today's agenda. For the item just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendment are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of the recipient of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment, to submit written comment on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on September 8th, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. So we'll go through the agenda and item number 1, declaration of interest. I see none. Confirmation of minutes 24, the meeting of June 28, 2021 of the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. Is the minutes confirmed? Sure. Thank you very much. We have Planning and Infrastructure Economic Development Plan Service. Item number 1 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 5254 Bank Street. And we do have a motion from Councillor DeRuse on this item. And if Councillor DeRuse successful introduce his motion and we vote on it, then there will be no need to have a presentation on this item from both city staff or the applicant. So I would like to turn it to Councillor DeRuse to introduce his motion. Councillor DeRuse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee, and through the chair, whereas the staff has recommended that the zoning bylaw amendment for 5254 Bank Street to be refused, and whereas despite the staff recommendation, the subject property is not a desirable location for residential use, and whereas the property is subject to site plan control and the application for site plan approval will require the owner to demonstrate that waste water generated from the purpose use can be suitably treated on site with permittable wastewater servicing option. Therefore, be it resolved that the report recommendation number 1 be amended as follows: that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 5254 Bank Street for the purposes of rezoning the land from rural countryside subzone 2, which is RU2, to rural general industrial subzone 3, exception XX RG3, with provision as per the revised detail of recommended zoning bylaw as tabled below.
Thank you, Councillor. And so obviously this is the item on the front of us, and I did speak with staff, and I understand their position as a staff that cannot recommend the approval of this item. But as what we heard from Councillor DeRose and knowing the size of the lot and the challenges we have to and the location of that property, I will be supporting Councillor DeRose's motion. So if there's any question, we have Mr. Brown on the call with us from college. If it's not, I'd like to take a vote on Councillor DeRose's motion. And if that passed, that means we don't have to have the presentation from either party. Councillor Gower, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I do have some questions for staff. Are we considering this item now, or are you going to hold this, Chair?
We can hold it if you wish, and we'll go through the consent agenda, and then we can come back to it. So, but now we have Councillor DeRose's motion on the front of us to deal with when we come back. So, okay, so we can hold item number 1, and we go to item number 2, which is the zoning bylaw amendment, part of 1120 Manatic Station Road. So we have no speaker, I believe, right, Mr. Desjardins, and on this item, and we have no communication. Can we carry item number 2?
Carry.
Okay.
The only people that we have is Tim Chatter, who is on behalf of the applicant, but he doesn't need to speak if we're going to carry it on consent. So
I don't see. Oh. Number 3, since we have a resident, and also we have resident item number 1 as well. Is that correct, Mark? We have people for item number 1?
well, for item number 1, we have the applicant who is against the
Staff
recommendation. So they have a PowerPoint, and there's also a PowerPoint from staff as well if they want to hear.
Okay, let's deal with item number 1 since we held item number 1 first. Councillor Gower, you have question about item number 1.
I do for staff, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand. Staff have identified a risk if we are to approve this around concerns with wastewater treatment, around the septic issues, around drinking water. I'm trying to understand, I guess, the level of risk. Is this a risk that just policy won't allow it? Is a significant risk? I'm worried about the implications should we approve this, what other levels of approval there might be that any development would have to go through on this site. I'm looking for a little more context from staff on what risk we're putting the city in should we approve this.
Mr. Chair, I'll let Anissa McAlpine, the file lead, run point on questions for this. So Anissa, if you could respond to the councillor, thank you.
No, of course, it's a very good question. Thank you. So staff are required to review the zoning bylaw amendment application with respect to provincial guidelines D54, which require that if we are going to rezone a site for industrial purposes, the site must be capable of treating its own septic waste based on a conventional system. The applicant has indicated that some level of industrial development may be possible on the site with more advanced or tertiary systems, and that's a level of treatment that we are allowed to consider at a site plan application stage. However, at zoning bylaw amendment stage, that is not the level that we are allowed to contemplate. We cannot rezone and then require the new or the landowner to use a more advanced form of treatment. They're required to use the most, we must consider whether the site is suitable based on the most conventional systems, and it does not pass that test. Any further development, any further industrial development on the site would be subject to site plan control.
Okay, so yeah, so this isn't the final round of approval or evaluation of potential environmental issues. That would also come through site plan. So this is, am I understanding it right then? And maybe Councillor Derouz wants to jump in. This is about kind of a sequence of approvals, and our usual policy and sequence of approvals around zoning and site plan is the roadblock here that this applicant is seeking help from committee and council to overcome. I don't know if Councillor Derouz, if you wanted to.
Before we go to Councillor Derouz, I think Mr. Bond had his hand up. So why don't you answer that?
Sure. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this time. My name is Jonah Bond. I am a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners and a registered professional planner. I'm working on this file with Bill Holzman. Just to clarify, just to go back to Councillor Derouz's earlier motion, he did mention that all land uses would be prohibited except for a parking lot and storage yard, but I would note that there were a series of other uses which we also wanted to add to that holding for rezoning, and I don't necessarily need to get into those now, but there were certain ones like a light industrial use, a warehouse, a service and repair shop. So those are in my PowerPoint, and I could, if you want, skip to those quickly, but we'll leave that aside for now.
No, that's good enough, Mr. Bond. So I thought, my apologies, I thought you're one of our staff on the file, so I didn't know who you were, but that's okay.
No problem.
So we'll come back to you if we need to, but
thank you.
Councillor Gower, if you like to hear from Councillor Derouz, it's fine, but we did speak to Mr. Brown and the staff before, and you're right, this is round one of this application, but if you read the whole report, there's nothing else really. I understand staff's position, they cannot recommend it, but at the same time, there is still going to be a process in the future for this site before any development with the site plan approval. But Mr. Brown, do you care to add some more to what we hear, or?
I think Anissa covered it quite well, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I also want to add to Councillor Gower's that they do have a city water, Councillor Gower. It goes in front of the property. So the issues is around the conventional septic, and the D54 doesn't, in our processes, it's really handcuff us on how we can move forward. Our staff cannot go against the policy that we have, but there is technology and there is more way of when the applicant will apply in the site plan control, we can capture all these over there. So there is no, just to answer your question, it is one of those, no one want to live on that stretch of that Bank Street, and it's surrounded by aggregate, it's surrounded by commercial, and it's the whole dynamic of Bank Street has been changing, and this is why this application came across. Just to clarify for the record. Thank you.
Any other question, Councillor Gower? Or?
I guess, I mean, I want to hear it again from staff, because in the report, there are significant concerns raised, potential risk around septic servicing, around groundwater issues. I just want to make sure I'm hearing again clearly that if we were to go against the staff recommendation, which is to not approve, that we have every mechanism or every ability through the site plan process to properly evaluate and ensure that these issues can be addressed and mitigated through that site plan process.
Anissa?
Perhaps you could distill the question once more.
Well, I think my understanding is you're recommending no rezoning because usually we require the servicing in place first to simplify it a little bit here. That servicing's not in place, so staff can't recommend a rezoning. The concern around not having servicing is in the future there might be issues with groundwater contamination due to a lack of an adequate septic tank. I just want to make sure that I'm confident that through site plan, for example, to make sure that it's adequate for the future intended use, and that we aren't going to be at any risk of negative impact to surrounding properties as a result of future development. That site plan, I guess what I'm asking is, give me confidence that site plan will satisfy any of the potential risks there. And if risks are identified, that this would not proceed if site plan process identifies significant risks to the surrounding properties.
Right. So the difference between a zoning bylaw review and a site plan control application review: zoning considers whether the proposed use is appropriate. Site plan considers what is the most appropriate way to design the site to achieve the best outcomes. So in this case, the review would suggest, based on the provincial guidelines, that the use is not appropriate. That being said, at a site plan level, the extent of development would be limited by that site plan control application to something that could be safely treated with advanced or tertiary treatment options.
I'd also add, Mr. Chair, that Councillor Giroux's motion also has a provision that of a holding symbol. And if you read the details of the holding symbol, site plan control application demonstrating that the wastewater generated from the proposed use can be suitably treated on site with a permittable wastewater servicing option. So there are some checks and balances that will be put in place through site plan approval.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. No more questions.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks. I was really just going to indicate what Mr. Brown had just indicated, because in that holding provision is also a phase 2 ESA, a stormwater management report, a transportation impact assessment, and an aggregate resource impact assessment. I mean, this is a residential property in between a rural general industrial and a mineral extraction zone, two very large zones that are on either side of this. If this proposal in front of us was a rural commercial to a residential use, we wouldn't even entertain it. We wouldn't even come close to entertaining it. I don't even think staff they'd get past a pre-consult to put a house in this area. But we have a house there today. If certainly the concern is public safety and through water and servicing, that concern is greater with the existing use than with the proposed use. So I think this is one of those cases where, yes, the policy sort of puts staff in a position to be where they are with this report, but it's our job as policymakers to actually see where exceptions can be made, given the information that we have in front of us. So, I think I support obviously I support the decision, the motion put forward by George Giroux in this case, because I think it makes sense in the context of the area and the neighboring properties, and certainly with the holding provisions that are included in this file. Okay, so sorry, Mr. Baum, we're not, this is just the committee now debating, and I'm going to turn it to Councillor Giroux if you have something, or if there's any other question from the committee member. If it's not, we'll go to Councillor Giroux if you feel like the need to wrap up, or we can go to the A's and A's. It's up to you.
No, I really appreciate the support, and that was very good question and concern. But like Councillor Moffat really summed it perfectly. If this is a residential, if this is a property, we're going to switch it to residential. it will be totally different. This is makes sense, the motion to help moving forward with that zoning for the resident that they live on that road, because no one want to live on the house in between all these commercial and the aggregate on top of that, the commercial on Highway 31. Anyway, we can go to the vote, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for all your questions, and to our staff and to the applicant for coming up today. So on Councilor DeRuza's motion, do we need ayes and nays, or is carry?
Carried.
Carried.
Okay. Okay. So the motion carried. Thank you very much, folks. And now we go to item number 3, which is a Cranberry Creek Municipal Drain appointment of engineer. Just
Chair?
wondering, yes.
I'm just wondering if you want to ask the applicant if they're happy with the results of the motion there.
So I should have, but because we didn't, the applicant, I see him smiling, so I would imagine that means yes. Go ahead.
Hi, just one point of clarification. So I didn't catch Councilor DeRuza's motion in complete detail, but I saw that all land uses would be prohibited except for parking lot and storage yard. That was something we did suggest, and we're content with that. But there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 other uses which we also wanted folded in to that holding zone. So all of the uses would be under a holding. I think what Councilor DeRuza had proposed was parking lot and storage yard, and that was a direct extraction from what was in the document 2 to the report to ARAC. But there were a couple of other uses. I could, if you don't mind, name them quickly. They would also fall under the umbrella of the holding, and they are as follows, if you would be so kind as to permit me. Automobile dealership, automobile service station, heavy equipment and vehicle sales, light industrial uses, a printing plant, a retail store with limitations as per the rural general industrial, limited to the sale of agricultural, construction, gardening, or landscape products, a service and repair shop, and a warehouse. So all of these would sort of fold into the same holding, which would require, that various technical matters be addressed. So it was more than just a parking lot and storage yard, to be clear, if you could kindly consider that. Thank you.
Mark, does the proponent have a copy of Councilor DeRuza's or the applicant? Do they have a copy of his motion?
No, I just got the motion late, so
Okay.
I didn't have a chance to send it to him.
Mr. Brown, I see you want to go ahead, jump in.
Yes, Mr. Chair, essentially, based on Councilor DeRuza's motion, they would be permitted a parking lot or a storage yard, and all other uses would be permitted under the RG3 zone once the hold is lifted. So I don't know all those uses. I don't have the RG3 zoning in front of me to confirm what Mr. Bond has listed off, but if those uses are listed in the RG3 parent zone, they would be permitted once the hold is lifted as described in the exception of the zoning of the motion that Councilor DeRuza has put forward.
Okay, my advice, Mr. Bond, you can talk to our staff after between now and council meeting, and if there's any amendment or anything need to be added, we can add it. But this is just a step 1 in the process. So
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add what I thought I had read was all
Okay.
uses prohibited except. So if you're content with me setting this aside and there's some language to be massaged, I can deal with that with staff and set this aside if everyone's content.
It's Councillor Meehan. Do we stipulate the if it were that a warehouse is going to go in there? Do we stipulate the amount?
I can attempt to answer that. It would be entirely constrained by technical matters, and namely tertiary system. And really, it's not so much the size of the building, but the number of water closets in the building. Our conceptual tertiary septic system analysis allowed for a maximum of 200 square meters. So a fairly modest sized building, but if it turns out it has to be 180, it has to be 180, but that's a matter for a future date at site plan stage.
Thank you. Okay, great, thanks.
okay, thank you very much. And so the Councilor DeRuza's motion carried. Now on the item, I guess once we carry the Councilor DeRusa's motion will move forward. And if there's any discussion between now and Council, Mr. Brown, you can let the committee member know, and we can amend if it's need to be amended from now till then. Is that fair?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all. And
Item one, Chair, item one is carried as amended.
as amended, yes, yes. And was carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Now we'll go to item number 3, Cranberry Creek Municipal Drain Appointment of Engineer. And this item just to reappoint an engineer on this file, but I'm not sure if Ms. Moore or Mr. Ryan wants to just put it in a little bit of context, because we do have a couple of residents that signed up to speak on this item, but I want to make sure that the speaker stay within what's on the front of us today. And on the front of us today is reappointment of the engineer on the file. Mr. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may just turn my video off for connectivity issues, but I can speak to that. So a few years back, council appointed a drainage engineer to update the report under it's a section 78. It's an improvement to the drainage works. The Cranberry Creek drain's been there for over 100 years. It's just in the North Gore area. It was to reinstate a dike and pump into the system. It ended up being challenged at the tribunal, and the tribunal set aside the engineer's report for different reasons. But one of the recommendations by the tribunal was to update the assessment schedules. So these are communal systems. We assess the cost back to the benefiting landowners. And one of the recommendations was to have those assessment schedules updated, so when we do maintenance, which we are required to do legally, that we can assess these costs back to the appropriate landowner. This is basically a paperwork exercise to update the schedules. They're about 90% complete, I would say, because the engineer did them as part of the previous report. So they just need to be updated and basically identify any changes that happened in the last couple of years with respect to property ownership. So that's we also had an external legal counsel provide a similar opinion as well. So this is where we're at, to appoint the engineer again, just to update the assessment schedule for the drain.
Thank you for that, Mr. Ryan. And before we go to so just for clarity, appointing a new engineer to the file, that means it's going back to the basic and start all over, which is going to be way more costly to the catchment area. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mr. Robinson has been involved in this drain for a number of years, and you're right. He's through the previous process, which was just a few years ago. The schedules were updated. So again, it's for him to continue makes the most sense to go back and have another engineer that isn't familiar with the drain and with the area, with the watershed, with the properties and so on, and recreate these schedules, which can be quite complex, would cost considerably more.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. So, Mr. Desjardins, we have Ms. Whitemore to speak, and who else on this file?
The first speaker is Lisa Larwell, and then the second speaker is Connie Whitmore.
Okay, so can we bring them in one at a time? Lisa first, perhaps.
Hello, I'm going to do it without video just to make sure that it's not an issue. So I was one of the people that went all the way to the Drainage Tribunal and spoke at the Drainage Tribunal. So just to give a quick, I have my project management professional certification, so I quite understand the way projects work and stuff like that. So my concern is in regards to the engineering report. The formulas that were used became quite apparent during the last day that I was there, when they were asking the engineer in regards to why there were certain ways he did things. And the gentleman that was on the panel seemed to have a lot more knowledge in regards to the new formulas, how things were done now, while Mr. Robinson said he did have taken some courses and stuff like that, it appeared to me that he was not using the latest and greatest. The formulas were very flawed from what I could understand. And because I sit within the group of people that had sent it to originally to, through the process, this affects me greatly. So my concern is that we're taking something that the Drainage Tribunal has said, okay, there's a problem here. I understand the concept of, it's easier for Mr. Robinson because he does have a great deal of experience. But my concern is when someone has been doing something for a very long time, they become complacent and they don't stop and think about, okay, how can we do this in another way? There was no options given. There was one specific option. When I looked at this, when I got all this information, what I realized was we just took what was there in the past. We didn't take any consideration into how things may have changed presently. And now we're going to just charge people this much money because I am a stakeholder and it's not the city's money, it's my money. I feel that I should be much more a part of the process. I don't know if there was, do you have, as a contractor in the government, is there a standing, is there a statement of work? Is there what the expectations are? Is there a benefits analysis? And the benefits that I saw were strictly to the farmers, which I get, that's their livelihood. So this is where I sit today. And this is why I've asked to speak today, because I don't feel that taking what was given and just changing the dollar value is going to, you're still going to have the same problems. All of the things that, the group of us went, other than the pump and dike, that's gone. But the rest of it, it's important to take into account what the tribunal has said he needs to look at. And I'm sure Mr. Robinson will, but I just want to make sure that everybody here understands that this may not be the case. So that's why I'm speaking today, because it greatly affects. And because I was not part of the original process, I kind of have to go on what, the people that deal with him on a regular basis know. The fact that he has 40 years experience, that's great. You have an experienced drainage person, but does that mean that he's just going to, because he's comfortable with it or because he thinks he knows it, is he going to step back and say, oh, let's look at various options, not just take what the report says and just plug it in and off we go? Because
1 minute.
Yeah. So my last case is, as we all know, construction projects, because you guys build stuff often, construction projects cost more from when they start to when they finish. So that's the other thing I'm concerned about. The costing that we have today, as we know, from having to pay for the report, when it started in 2017, and I called Aaron when I first got my paperwork because I knew what was going to happen. And as we all know, things go up. So I'm also concerned about what the cost is going to be going forward. So originally mine was $15,000. which is a lot of money. So I also want to make sure that what he does also takes into account the best way to do it and to make sure he looks at what they're doing today and taking that into account. So,
Time.
yep, that's it. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Largo. Do we have any question for the presenter? I see none. Thank you very much, Lisa. We go to Ms. Whitmore. You're on mute.
There,
Okay.
is that better?
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I have submitted a written letter to the members of ARAC, as well as some supporting documentation, which are a recap of the findings, that section of the report from the Drainage Tribunal. in terms of my background, I have 40+ years experience as a career management consultant. And a lot of what I have done was to assist clients with figuring out what went wrong on projects. I was also the lead for the tribunal appeal and coordinated the input of the 40 appellants. So we're not at all opposed to a new engineer report for maintenance of the Cranberry Creek drain. In fact, that was stipulated by the decision of the tribunal that one be done. But it was to focus on maintenance and not just include assessments. So I think that characterization was wrong. In addition, we would like to see more content other than just assessment tables coming forth in the engineer report for several reasons. So we're not opposed to the appointment of the engineer to prepare a report. We are, however, concerned that the intention is to appoint the same engineer to conduct the new study. The December 2017 engineers report by Robin Consulting was set aside due to several reasons, which included misleading statements. And I refer to you the section and improvement project on page 83 of the tribunal decision, and the very numerous errors and omissions in the document, which again, I refer you to section errors, omissions, and alterations on page 91 of the decision. The cost of preparation, the report was $385,000, which does not include the engineer's attendance and participation in the appeals before the Court of Revision or the Ontario Drainage Tribunal. And although the city's intention was to charge these costs back to landowners within the watershed, under the circumstances, the tribunal's decision directed that these monies be paid from the city's general fund. It was a costly exercise for all involved, and we're providing this input today in the hopes that future appeals on this new report will not be required. So we request reconsideration of this appointment and at least a competitive process for the contract. Now, one of the things, as I said, I've done a lot of what goes wrong on projects, and not having a statement of work is key because it's the basis for governance, but also that statement of work should include specifications of the deliverables that are expected from the consulting firm. And when I was involved with the appeal process, I did go out to other engineering firms to see if they could do a peer review, and they specified that they required certain data, including the data used for the assessments and the modeling. That was not provided to the city. Only the report was provided to the city.
1 minute.
So, 1 minute? Okay, so I think that it's important to specify, otherwise you're caught with having to go back to the same consultant at extreme, otherwise incurring costs. So certainly that's an issue which needs to be addressed. So basically, there are other considerations that I have indicated in my letter to you, and I ask you to look at those in detail. And to summarize, we're looking for the sole source appointment of Robin Consulting for this work be reconsidered, and that the appointment for preparation of this engineer be subject to a competitive process. The appointment of engineer document to be amended to include the following content, and I've specified that. Also, this is an ecologically sensitive area, which includes provincially significant wetlands, which are connected to Berkshire Conservation. We're asking that ARAC not take a decision on the appointment of the engineer document until it is amended as requested.
Thank you very much, Ms. Whitemore. I see no question from my colleague to the presenter. Well, thank you very much for coming out today, and I acknowledge I received your communication with the committee coordinator and the rest of us. So thank you for doing this.
May I
And-
just add that Dr. Robert McGregor?
No, we can't add. It has to be registered ahead of time. Thank you very much, though. And turn it over to our staff, to my colleagues. Do you have any question? We have Dave Ryan still on the call and Aaron Moore. So do we have a question? What we heard?
Just a couple of comments, Mr. Chair.
Please go.
Yeah, thank you. We are following the city's procurement policy on this. There's a standing offer. Mr. Robinson is on that standing offer. The report, the decision of the tribunal and the engineer's report was reviewed by external experts, and both engineers, the PEO, the Professional Engineers of Ontario Land Drainage Committee, reviewed the report, as did external legal counsel, and found no issues with the methodology that was used. So the tribunal decision was for lack of a better term, a bit of a head scratcher provincially, but it is what it is. But Mr. Robinson, the methodology that he uses for his assessment schedules is not antiquated. It's been updated. He's following industry standards and guidelines, and yeah, it was accepted. It's accepted by most of the drainage engineers in Ontario.
Thank you for that, Mr. And Councillor Meehan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know that Mr. Robinson is attending this meeting with us today. I'm wondering, is it possible to ask him a question? Okay, Mr. Robinson, is there more that you could provide in your reports? The statement of work, is there something that you could amend or perhaps add that would address some of the concerns of people who went to the Drainage Tribunal, that could actually help them understand that your work process and your understanding of this issue?
Mr. Robinson?
Well, Section 76 of the Drainage Act, which this appointment is under, is really just for doing an updated assessment schedule. I use that word purposely because it's only, and all it does, the only work that can be undertaken is basically maintenance of the existing drain as it was originally constructed. So it's not a matter of doing more or different work than was originally constructed. The whole idea is to update the assessment schedules with new ownership and updated information. So it's not a very it's a pretty straightforward process. The method we use, as Mr. Ryan has pointed out, is spelled out in the report. I mean, I appreciate the comments by the two presenters. Is that the Cranberry Creek report was a very comprehensive report, and there were a number of items. The unfortunate part is that likely with an extra day's work or maybe 2 days work, we could have updated the original report, not talking about the dike and pump, which were more controversial, to have essentially been there and been something that could have been implemented using that, so that there's not a lot. I think we provide and have had discussions with Mr. Ryan and his staff regarding what needs to be done, and that's what we presented at a fairly minimal cost. The idea of cost estimates really for maintenance don't come into play. In other words, we will update the assessment schedules based on, for the sake of argument, based on the original cost or based on a cost that is perhaps one that we provide in the original report, in order to spread the assessments over the actual maintenance, which would be done by the municipality. It'll cost what it costs. It's a little different in doing this than doing a new engineer's report where we're dealing with updated new costs. So I don't think there's an awful lot more that can be added, but we can provide Mr. Ryan with a little more detail. We provided our cost estimate on this and a brief proposal several months ago, so I haven't had a look at it, but we can certainly provide a little more detail if that's something that Mr. Ryan felt would be necessary.
Is there new information to be obtained?
The primarily new information to be obtained is updated property ownership within the watershed, because the other information is available from the original report and from working with the Drainage Tribunal. This was, I think, a 12-day tribunal, so that we did update issues as they came up, some of which were small adjustments to properties, some of which were a little more significant. So there really isn't too much more to obtain other than updating the property ownership.
Okay. I'm a little concerned with some of the comments that our presenters made there today, that there are people with I guess newer methods of doing things in comparison to the like your way, but
yeah. But Councillor, we have to be cautious here. Our job either to appoint the engineer. We cannot direct the engineer on their reporting. What's on the front of us today, and we heard from our staff, changing engineer right now will be a huge cost on the same resident who are we trying to avoid additional costs. So
I understand that. It's just some of the allegations
yes,
are concerning. That's all. Okay. I'll leave it there then.
Mr. Chair, if I could just comment, and I think Mr. Ryan has, we do use the most up-to-date approach. I appreciate that the engineer who was on the Drainage Tribunal likely has been away from doing reports directly himself for a while, but I think likely has a different perspective. And if you were to interview all of the drainage engineers in Ontario, you would find that there are different perspectives, because it's not a cut and dried process. But I can assure you that we review information. We are using up to date. There's information there's a new document was issued, quite frankly, after we had completed the report, which we review in using this. So I don't know whether it's any comfort, but all I can say is we try to keep up to date and use the most current approach to assessments.
thank you, Mr. Robinson. I think what's comforting for us now, the Ontario engineer of Ontario also checked on the report and had no concern on it. So I'm not sure if any other colleague have anything. So I like to read what's on the front of us. So that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that Council appoint Mr. Andy Robinson, P.N. of Robinson Consultant, Inc., as the engineer of record to prepare a report under Section 76-1 of the Drainage Act to revise the assessment schedule of the Cranberry Creek Municipal Drain Engineers Report 1969, prepared by Graham Berman and Associate Limited, in response to a decision of the Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs Appeal Tribunal regarding Cranberry Creek Municipal Drain, dated June 30, 2020. So that's one on the front of us. And I see Councilor Moffat has your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks. Just to whoever wants to respond, whether it's Andy or Dave. The report, the challenge that we have currently, if I'm not mistaken, is that doing maintenance on this drain under the 1969 report means that we have to assess properties based on the 1969 report assessment schedule, which is clearly out of date by 52 years. And the intent of appointing the engineer for this purpose is to update that assessment schedule. But just to be clear, within that same watershed, because one of the contentions, of course, through this has been that the watershed changed with updated mapping, and that brought in a lot of individuals who weren't previously assessed under this drain.
Mr. Chair, I'll ask the engineer to address that, please, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Mr. Robinson.
Yes, well, certainly the intent would be to use the most current information that as far as the watershed area, and there are some changes to the original one, which primarily it's because we have a lot more accurate mapping now. But one of the areas that I was contentious in the hearing was with respect to who got assessed for the pump station and the dike, so that, you know, in looking at the drain itself, we would plan to use the current or the most current drainage area and related properties.
All right, and the intent would be that we would then go out and do maintenance on the drain. Now, the drain itself is not in compliance with the engineer's report as it stands today. So the tribunal decision spoke to the revision of deleting the pump station and dike, but of course, the engineer's report that we have to adhere to includes a pump station and dike. So this is just a Section 76 report. What's the go forward? I mean, we have a number of individuals on this municipal drain in this watershed that believe that there will be no pump station and dike. We obviously have another group that would prefer to have a reinstatement, not exactly of the initial one, but of an updated one to accommodate the current volumes of water, not necessarily the 1969 volumes of water. What's the plan for that? What do we tell them?
So the challenge, through you, Mr. Chair, the challenge, Councillor, as you're aware, is that the dike and the pump were there to provide to control the outlet, right, and the backwater from the Rideau River. The challenge without the dike and the pump is that in order to do maintenance is going to be challenging. We have to look at that, our methodologies, what we can do. We continue to do spot maintenance. We have over the years, beaver dam removals, blockages, that type of thing. But to do a fulsome maintenance has always been the issue without the dike and the pump, because in essence, what you're doing if you dig upstream is creating a bathtub, right? So there's nowhere for the water to go. And so we have to look at other options. One option is reinstating the dike and the pump as per the 69 report. Another one would be potential temporary dike structures, perhaps with pumps. So there's various options, but the fact that the dike and the pump is not part of the engineered drainage system, which it was, is very challenging, again, because you need an outlet for this water. If you're going to encourage the water to flow downstream, it needs to get away. And if the Rideau River is higher, then you're creating in essence a bathtub situation. So we can continue to do spot maintenance. We need to look at what we can do with respect to maintenance on the rest of the drainage works. And there's a number of other drains that feed into this drain as well that we can do maintenance on that are further upstream. But it is going to be a challenge, but our plan is to look at other options as mentioned.
Okay, thanks. Obviously it was 7 years ago that we appointed the engineer after the complaint from residents in the spring of 2013. Obviously, we've gone through a lot. Councillor Chantieri and Councillor DeRuse are well aware of what we've gone through with the Committee of Adjustment, or the Committee of the Court of Revision, sorry. Of course, that Court of Revision decision is moot now with the setting aside of the engineer's report by the tribunal. But this is a logical next step. We have to appoint the engineer according to the tribunal, to appoint another engineer or an engineer in general, to go this next step. I just hope that we can find some resolution to this for the long term. I mean, this was an issue since 1991. No one took care of it back then. it's set aside because thankfully we had some dry conditions in North Gore for 20 some odd years. The same cannot be said for the last 8 years. So this is going to be an issue into the future, and hopefully it might get resolved after I'm gone. But I hope that there's some resolution that can satisfy, it's not just the greater watershed, but the individual. I mean, Lisa Larwell's here. She's right within that main initial watershed that required drainage in the first place. So there's a lot of individuals that are interested in this, and hopefully we can find some solution long-term, more than just this updating of the assessment schedule. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Moffat. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not exactly sure who to direct my question to. I suppose staff. In the tribunal decision, it listed that there was several errors and omission from the original engineer's report, and we're discussing appointing the same engineer. So is this something that we should be concerned about?
Mr. Ryan.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So again, this is strictly updating the assessment schedules, and I think, as Mr. Robinson has explained, he is using the most current and up-to-date methodologies. They've been accepted, they're industry standards, there's guidelines, he's followed those. There was a bit of a, I guess the engineer on the tribunal didn't see it that way, but again, as to Mr. Robinson's earlier point, he's been out of the business for quite a long time himself. So this is strictly a paperwork exercise to update the assessment schedules, which are 90% complete. It's just a matter of updating how they've changed from 2017 till now. So that's all it is. We're not doing anything else but that. And Mr. Robinson has the history, the experience, and he's the only, in my mind, it's the logical choice to appoint him from a cost perspective as well.
Okay. The tribunal decision also mentioned the cost benefit analysis as being outside the engineer's report. And I know we heard from Ms. Larwell that that was a concern. Is this analysis still being conducted with respect to the other works, not the pump and dike, but the other works? Is there a cost benefit analysis being conducted?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there's not. So that pertained to the dike and pump installation, the reinstatement of the dike and pump, and that project. So that cost benefit analysis discussion pertains strictly to that process, which was to reinstate the dike and the pump. So no.
So we won't be conducting a cost benefit analysis for the other works?
For maintenance, no, that's not. It's not a requirement of the Drainage Act. It's not something we do. We are legally obligated to maintain the drainage works to the council-approved design and whatever's in the bylaw. So once it's passed by council, there's a bylaw that goes with that. It has legal status under the Provincial Drainage Act. And we are obligated as a municipality, as are other municipalities in Ontario, to maintain that drainage works to the approved engineer's report and bylaw for the drain. So there's an engineered design. These are engineered systems, and we have to maintain them to that as closely as possible to those that design. Okay,
thank you.
Any other question from my colleagues? Mr. Ryan, I just want to say thank you to you, because a few years ago you took me on a tour for that Cranberry Creek, catchment area, and have to tell you, is maybe we should teach it at the college, about the Cranberry Creek, because it's really a lot of people misunderstood the value of that drainage and the benefit from it to a larger area, and not almost the catchment area. It's larger than the catchment area itself. And I'm always interested to see, we're going back to the 1969 model, which is the pump and the dike was installed at that time to help. But when I was with you, the Rideau River was almost just as high, the water in it, than the dike itself. So I'm not sure, even if we have a pump, where would you pump the water to? So anyway, but what's on front of us today is to reappoint the engineer on it. So I read what's in front of us. So we'll go to 8 and 8 on it. Mr. Desjardins.
Yes, Councillor. Councillor Meehan,
Yay.
Councillor Moffat,
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse,
Yes.
Councillor Gower,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kitts,
Yes.
Chair El Shantiri.
Yes.
You got 6 yeas.
Thank you. Thank you, colleague, and Ms. Robson and Mr. Ryan and Ms. Moore for your participation. Item number 4, and I turn the floor to Councillor Moffat to read his motion. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks. Just oh, there it is. I wrote it this morning, so you think I would know. So just a motion about a bike repair station in Manotick. It's kind of a quirky situation. There's been a push with the BIA and others to put cycling racks and whatnot in the village, and there was a business that approached about a bike repair station. Of course, we have these throughout the city. There was a desire to have one in Manotick, along Manotick Main Street, even along Bridge Street for that matter. There's not a lot of public property. There's the school over there, but that's not actually city owned. So obviously, we don't have a lot of public access for placing one of these stations where it would be in a good location. So as such, we came up with this plan to have one placed on private property where a platform has already been built for it by the business. So I'll just read the motion, kind of says it all. So whereas there's a need for a bike station in the village core of Manotick to serve cyclists in the community at large, and whereas 692 Coffee and Bar have identified an ideal location accessible by all along Manotick Main Street on their property, and whereas there are limited opportunities for a bike repair station on city-owned land in the vicinity, and any that do exist are less than ideal. And whereas Section 5.1 of the council expense policy restricts the use of a council's office budget from funding a bike repair station on private property unless exempted by council. And whereas the cost to install and maintain the bike repair station for 3 years is $2,500, therefore be it resolved that Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend that council approve an exception to Section 5.1 of the council expense policy to allow for the allocation from Ward 21 office budget to the Safer Roads Ottawa program to support the installation and maintenance of a bike repair station at 692 Coffee and Bar located at 5546 Manotick Main Street. So this isn't exactly my office just handing out money to a business. This money goes directly over to Safer Roads Ottawa in order for them to install a bike repair station on Main Street, Manotick.
Any question from my colleague? Councillor Meehan, go ahead.
Oh, I just love the idea. And I'd like one in my ward too. So great idea, Scott. Thank you. I might adopt this. But
I can't pay for yours.
No, I would pay for my own. But we certainly don't have enough bike repair shops. I'm just trying to, I know 692 Coffee behind it, or where's
No,
it
so if you
go?
if you happen to be by there anytime soon, if you notice just to the left of the door as you go down the side of their wall, so the front door, that front platform, side of their wall, they do have a concrete platform there with a bike rack already on it, and there is space reserved right there. So it's just off the sidewalk. I would say maybe 2 meters off the sidewalk back to where the bike repair station would be.
No, great. I think this is a great idea. I would support this. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would imagine that Councillor Moffat, it will be some kind of agreement with the private business owner to always be accessible to the public that matter.
So there is an agreement that has to be signed between the business owner and Safer Roads Ottawa on a number of things. This really is just the financial piece I'm paying for. Well, my office is paying for it. Taxpayers are paying for it, not me personally.
Well, it sounds good because we have them in the public places in Carp in front of the community center. So, and anyway, I didn't have to pay for it, but I would support you paying for yours. And the rest of my colleague, I believe, would get to go with that. Can we approve the motion?
Yeah.
Carrie? Carrie, thank you very much. And that will conclude our agenda. We have open mic session. So before we invite the participant of the open mic, we can just listen to what's been presented to us. If any question for clarity, just for clarity we can, but we cannot give direction to staff or move a motion on those presentation. That's the rule of the open mic session. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Desjardins to invite Ms. Kathy Black and Laura Tones for the power presentation. And I believe together we have 10 minutes. Is that correct, Mr. Desjardins?
Correct. They're 5 minutes each.
Okay. Go ahead, please invite them.
Kathy Black is on with us now. If she can unmute, then we can start her presentation.
And I see Laura just pop up on the screen. Miss Black, are you on call?
Hi, we're having a little trouble here with.
We have a lot of echo. Okay. Are they still with us, Mark? Or they're still on the screen, but are they still with us?
They're still there. Just have to unmute. They might be having problems out in the rural area.
Well,
Kathy, are you still there?
Hi, sorry, we're having trouble here.
so perhaps we can reschedule you for the next meeting in October. Hello? Okay, so Mr. Desjardins, you can reach out to the resident and probably we can reschedule them for October. I don't believe their issue is timely, so they just want to address the committee, I believe, about traffic issue in Constance Bay. So
go ahead, Kathy. We can hardly hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
That's any note of motion for next meeting? Any inquiries?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, but we can hear one of you, but when together we have echo. We can't hear neither one of you.
Okay, turn that down. Okay, sorry about that. We're just having internet connectivity problems out here. Sorry for the inconvenience. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the city's parking petition process that we undertook in Constance Bay. Next slide, please. Constance Bay is a small rural village of approximately 1,100 homes with one road in and out of the village. We have no sidewalks and narrow shoulders on the road. Next slide, please. The volume of casual visitors coming here in warm months has been increasing annually over the decades. The overcapacity was shockingly evident in 2020 as a result of the blatant disregard of day trippers for social distancing and the sheer volumes of cars on the road. Concerned residents used the map and address list requested by the councillor from Traffic Services for the city's parking petition process to canvass door-to-door COVID safely. We completed the petition forms and handed them over to the city on August the 17th for the traffic specialist. Next slide, please. Our concerns are safety related in the warm weather months related to the volume of parked cars. Some are parked in the roadway, nowhere to park or walk or cycle, blocked laneways and blocked mailboxes. Residents can't get out to work, appointments, pick up the children from daycare. Residents do not get their mail if their mailbox is obstructed by parked cars. Residents and children are at risk to walk, cycle, walk dogs on Bayview Drive on hot sunny days because of the volume of parked cars and traffic. Next slide, please. Residents want seasonal enforced no parking on one side of Bayview Drive. We want to get our mail delivered every day, not just on cold, cloudy days. We want emergency services to be able to respond without having to navigate throngs of traffic and parked cars. We want annually allocated bylaw service officers dedicated to Constance Bay on hot, sunny days. We are taxpayers and we are just as entitled to have access to our laneways and our mail as city residents. Next slide, please. The petition process revealed 97% of the 273 addresses we were able to talk to are in favor of having seasonal no parking on one side of Bayview with the accompanying bylaw enforcement. We were diligent in trying to reach all 273 addresses, and we were able to locate 4 other addresses the city had previously agreed to remove that we had identified as abandoned cottages. We went the extra mile to canvass everyone. We needed 66% agreement, and of the 273, 223 voted yes, or 82%. We weren't able to contact 41 homeowners. Next slide, please. Canada Post was contacted and made it clear that removing parked cars from obstructing mailboxes is the city's responsibility. They provided us with the Canada Post rural mailbox guidelines. The local driver said every day he cannot deliver mail in Constance Bay because of parked cars blocking mailboxes. Will the city please update its parking bylaw to reflect language that enables bylaw officers to ticket or tow cars? The petition result is very clear. Residents have spoken their wishes. The result is a resounding yes vote to change the parking regulations. Next slide, please. The request. Included in the 223 yes forms are the yes of the church, 2 restaurants, and all of the volunteer firefighters canvassed supported the petition with a yes vote. In fact, one firefighter said he hoped the change to parking may save a life one day. On behalf of the 223 residents who voted yes for seasonal parking, we are requesting the committee support the city's petition process and the Ward 5 councillor who requested the map and list of addresses by carrying the motion on the following slide. Upon receipt of the staff report from Traffic Services, we are requesting the other standing committees, if required, such as Transportation and Community Protective Services, include agenda items to review and approve materials and labor, be provisioned to support the yes vote and the outcome of the city's parking petition for Constance Bay. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Kathy. And Laura, are you still there or you wish to speak?
Hi, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I have to step out to a meeting, so I'll have Gail sit in instead. Here she is.
Hello, I'm Gail Simmons. I'm a 45-year resident of Constance Bay. I want to tell you about the issues we have with blocked laneways, blocked mailboxes, and inadequate bylaw response. Residents, next slide, please. Residents have been subjected to parked cars blocking their laneways for decades. Bylaw doesn't respond in a timely manner. Responding 8 to 24 hours later doesn't let the homeowner get out of their laneway to get to work, pick up children, etc. Why shouldn't Constance Bay residents expect the same response time as city residents? Is there a 2-tier level of service? One for urban and a lesser level of service for rural residents? Next slide, please. I am confident that if this occurred in Kanata, Barhaven, or near the Civic Hospital neighborhoods, residents wouldn't wait 8 to 24 hours for a bylaw response. Next slide, please. This laneway is clearly evident, as shown by the gate. These are examples of what happens every summer. Next slide, please. According to the Canada Post driver, every day in Constance Bay on hot sunny days, he is unable to deliver mail because of parked cars obstructing mailboxes. People count on getting important mail on time. The city must provide residents with signs for their mailboxes indicating mail delivery zone, no parking. Next slide, please. The Royal Mailbox guidelines are very clear. Ms. Hodder, Senior Vice President, QC, Canada Post, was very clear that the city is authorized to handle parked cars obstructing mail delivery. Ottawa Bylaw Services tells callers they have no bylaw to enforce for the cars parked in front of mailboxes obstructing the mail delivery. The city needs to update Bylaw 2017-301, Part 2, Section 7. This next slide, please. This is an excerpt from the city's parking bylaw, which has to be updated. Next slide, please. These photos are samples of what happens every summer. Next slide, please. Blocked mailboxes. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We also have a problem with congested intersections because cars are parked all around the corners. The two problem areas are McCroskey and Bayview, and Bishop Davis and Bayview. These are currently unsigned intersections and are enforceable by the parking bylaw. However, bylaw tends not to enforce these parking infractions. For safety reasons, we feel both intersections should have signs installed indicating no parking here to corner. Next slide, please. These photos are examples of the problems. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Callers wait 15 to 20 minutes or more to report a request for service. Callers are told they won't open a ticket because they can't enforce the parking bylaw. Bylaw statistics are skewed because the number of tickets doesn't reflect the number of callers who are turned away. Callers are told response time is 1 business day minimum. Callers are also told they can't enforce block mailboxes as there is no existing bylaw to enforce. This means tough luck for the homeowner, no mail that day and the next if it happens to be hot and sunny for the next week. This is unacceptable. We have many seniors who rely on receiving pension checks on time. Other people count on receiving time-sensitive mail. Next slide, please. This is a sample of bylaw request categories taken from a city source, the response times and priority levels. As you can see, at best, residents can only expect a 1 business day response to a blocked laneway. This is completely unacceptable. Next slide, please. The parking bylaw needs to be updated to include mailbox clearance clause. The city needs to provide residents with signs indicating mail delivery zone, no parking. Bylaw needs a faster response to block laneways. People need to get out to go to work or pick up a waiting child. Bylaw officers need to be allocated annually going forward. Thank you. And are there any questions?
I see Councillor Moffat and then Councillor Meehan. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks. I'm just curious on the first presentation about the petition. Obviously, I think most of us have had parking restriction petitions come forward before, and that process does not involve a motion to committee or council. So I'm not sure why that request is there. Was there something I'm missing? Is there something, if they have a filled out petition in accordance with our parking rules, they submit that petition, and then as long as the councillor agrees with the results of the petition, then the parking limitation is put in place. So I'm not necessarily sure why that's there, but can I also assume, and councillor, you might know this more than you might be able to answer this quite easily. Can I assume this is all from the constant use of the non-city owned beach?
Perhaps. I just want you to know we've been working with traffic management from the city in the last couple of years. And in the last couple of years, we have designated 2 student bylaw in the summertime on the weekend for that area. Also, we have the temporarily signed and been monitored by staff on a regular basis. And based on a traffic recommendation, they recommend the traffic will be on the side of the beach, basically. So they don't want kids to get out of the van and run across the street. So based on their health and safety recommendation. So in the last 2 years, we've been doing the temporarily sign every summer. And now this petition would allow us, based on staff recommendation and support the council, we can have them permanently installed. And that's what this process. But to answer your question, why it's here in the front of us, I'm not sure, because this is open mic. We can just listen, but we cannot give direction or move any motion on the item. So, but thank you.
But the point is, you don't require.
Did you want me to answer the question, or did you want Councillor El Shantiri to answer the question? I wasn't quite sure.
Well, ultimately he answered it, but I mean, it was just merely, yeah. I mean, if we have a petition process to get no parking. So
the reason the motion and the presentation came to you folks was to make an awareness that we do have several issues here. It's a multi-pronged issue. Although the temporary signs are on the non-mailbox side, we're not getting our mail. So Canada Post is very clear. They've given rural mailbox delivery guidelines. You need a car length before and after a mailbox. What happens now is the no parking signs are on the other side of the road. So right now you have cars blocking the mailboxes every single hot sunny day in the summer, and the mailman simply does not deliver the mail. And he tells us that every day the mail is not being delivered here. So in considering where to put the no parking signs, traffic services needs to consider people getting their mail as well. And Ms. Hodder, who is the Senior Vice President of Sustainability and the Queen's Counsel at Canada Post, is very clear in her email saying that it's the city's responsibility to keep the mailboxes clear. I have correspondence dating back to June 16th of that. So it is the city's mandate to do that. She is very clear in that. So they need to consider that before the city wastes its money putting the signs on the wrong side of the street. They need to consider where the problem areas are for the mail person.
Councillor Meehan? Sorry, Councillor Moffat, are you having a question? No? Okay, Councillor Meehan?
Well, thank you very much. I first of all, I'd just like to say, I feel your pain, and I would dispute what you're saying though about the need to change the bylaw, because we can change the bylaw, but that doesn't mean we'll ever have the resources in order to respond properly. And I speak on this from experience, because I'd say that probably every, not just Constance Bay, but every area of the city has the same issue. And I particularly have one on my street where people park because there is an attraction on that's very close. And I can't get out of my driveway some days. And the school bus, now I'm seeing the school bus because people park early in the morning. The school bus isn't going to get down and be able to turn around. So you can put up all the signs you like. You can have the bylaw that you think is going to address this issue, but we don't have the resources, number one, to have bylaw there all the time. And that's just a fact. I'm just wondering if there is a way that you can have a collector or a shuttle bus that people have to park elsewhere, not on the streets around there, and that there is a shuttle bus that will take people there so you don't have the cars on your street at all. I know no parking signs won't work. It just won't work. So I'm just suggesting that maybe an alternate solution should be considered here, because you have to have bylaw there all the time, because bylaw can't respond to every complaint in the city. I've been saying that we need more bylaw in the city. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but you need a more serious solution than just signs here and bylaw.
Thank you. No, Laura, it's okay. It's not for you or Kathy. This is a comment the council is making about in general. We're not going to debate here. Yes, Councillor Meehan, all that has been reviewed right now. We even engaged the Canada Post in discussion with our staff before we bring a motion for permanent sign install. So we're still in the process. It's been 2 years. We're collecting all the data, and we can share it with you once the report comes to committee and council. But thank you, Kathy and Laura and whoever represented. It's great, and thank you for going door to door during the pandemic to sign for that petition. Really appreciate it as from the local councillors. So thank you both. And with that, we don't have any other item. Mr. Desjardins on the front of us.
Correct, Chair. There's no other items.
Okay. Adjournment. Thank you very much, folks. And we'll see you next week on council. Looking forward.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.